In a faith that spans 2 millennia, a church that claims over 1 billion followers, and a continent that holds more than 250 million of them, there has never, at least in modern times, been an African pope. But why? This is not just a question about religion. It's a question about power, about history, about how the church sees the world and who it believes is worthy of leading it. Today, we uncover the centuries-old journey of African Christianity, the unspoken biases of the Vatican, and the forces, both visible and hidden, that have kept the papacy far from the lands where it first took root. Let's begin with a little-known truth. There have been African popes. Yes, 3 of them. But that was long, long ago. Back when the Roman Empire was still intact, when Latin was the language of law and theology, when Northern Africa was not just a part of the Christian world, it was one of its beating hearts. The first was Pope Victor I. He served as the Bishop of Rome from around 189 to 199 AD. Born in the Roman province of Africa, modern-day Tunisia or Algeria, Victor wasn't just a ceremonial figure. He was a trailblazer. He pushed to unify the date of Easter for all Christians, challenging Eastern bishops and asserting the authority of Rome. Then came Pope Miltiades, also from North Africa, who reigned from 311 to 314 AD. His papacy marked a monumental shift. He oversaw the transition of Christianity from a persecuted faith to a tolerated religion under Emperor Constantine. Finally, Pope Gelasius I, who served from 492 to 496 AD. A strong theologian, some believe he may have had sub-Saharan ancestry. He famously asserted the supremacy of spiritual authority over temporal power, an idea that would echo throughout Catholic history. And then, silence. No more African popes, not for 1,500 years. To understand the absence, we need to return to the age when Christianity flourished on African soil. Alexandria in Egypt was one of the original patriarchates of the Church, alongside Rome, Constantinople, Antioch, and Jerusalem. This wasn't a marginal outpost, it was a center of learning, debate, and theological innovation. Thinkers like Origen, who tried to reconcile Greek philosophy with Christian faith. Athanasius, the man who defended the concept of the Trinity at the Council of Nicaea. And of course, St. Augustine of Hippo, born in present-day Algeria, arguably the most influential Christian thinker after Paul himself. But this African Christian civilization didn't last. From the 7th century onward, Islamic conquests swept across North Africa. Churches fell silent, seminaries emptied, monasteries were destroyed or converted. Christianity didn't vanish, but it was pushed to the margins. It survived in pockets, in Egypt's Coptic Church, in Ethiopia's ancient Orthodox traditions, but it no longer held sway in the political or theological centers of the broader Christian world. As Christianity took root in Europe, it also took on a distinctly European character. Rome became not just a holy city, but a capital of imperial-style governance. The papacy wasn't merely a spiritual office. It was power, land, money, influence. From the 8th century onward, the popes of Rome were almost exclusively Italian, and not just Italian, often from noble or politically connected families. The Church had become deeply intertwined with the ruling structures of medieval Europe. And while new continents were discovered during the Age of Exploration, the mindset of the Vatican remained enclosed within the boundaries of its own world. Even as Catholic missionaries traveled to Africa in the 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries, the relationship was not one of mutual respect. It was paternalistic, hierarchical, colonial. The priest taught. The African listened. The European governed. The African obeyed. Leadership flowed one way, and it wasn't toward the equator. In the 19th century, during the scramble for Africa, European powers colonized almost the entire continent. The Church, especially the Catholic Church, was part of the machinery of empire. Missionaries built schools and churches. They baptized, educated, and converted, but they did not elevate. African priests were trained, yes, but rarely promoted beyond the lowest levels. They were not trusted with authority. They were seen as permanent apprentices, never masters. This deliberate delay in developing indigenous leadership created a generational gap. By the time African nations began to gain independence in the mid-20th century, there were still very few African bishops, and even fewer cardinals. And only cardinals can vote for a pope. Only cardinals can become pope. Today, Africa is one of the fastest-growing regions for Catholicism. Nigeria alone has over 30 million Catholics. The Democratic Republic of Congo has nearly 45 million. Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania all boast thriving Catholic communities. In fact, some projections suggest that by 2050, 1 in 4 Catholics worldwide will be African. But representation at the top? Still disproportionately low. As of 2025, out of 136 cardinal electors, only 16 are African. That's just under 12%, far below the African share of the global Catholic population. The reasons are complicated, but the result is simple. When the time comes to choose a new pope, African candidates are usually on the margins. What's holding it back? Some argue it's just a matter of time, that it takes centuries to change an institution as old as the Catholic Church. But others point to more subtle obstacles. There's a persistent Eurocentrism in how the Vatican perceives leadership. There's an unspoken belief that a pope should come from the center of theological life, often assumed to be Europe or Latin America. African cardinals are often assigned pastoral roles rather than Vatican bureaucratic posts, which diminishes their visibility. Then there's the question of language, media exposure, and global politics. African cardinals rarely receive the kind of public platform their European counterparts do. And when it comes to informal campaigning, visibility matters. It's not just who you are, it's who knows your name. And yet, there have been moments, glimmers of possibility. Cardinal Francis Arinze of Nigeria was widely discussed as a potential successor to John Paul II in 2005. Fluent in Latin, English, and Italian, deeply orthodox, with decades of experience, he had the credentials. But he was passed over for Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, who became Benedict XVI. Then came Cardinal Peter Turkson of Ghana. Dynamic, charismatic, socially engaged. He led the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace and became a visible Vatican voice on climate change, global inequality, and African development. But when Pope Benedict resigned, it was Jorge Mario Bergoglio, Pope Francis, who emerged as the compromise candidate. Francis was a historic choice. The first pope from the Americas, the first Jesuit pope, the first from the global South. It signaled that the Church was open to change. But Africa still waited. The election of an African pope would not just be symbolic, it would be revolutionary. We are closer than ever before. More African bishops are being elevated to cardinal. African seminaries are full. African priests are now being sent as missionaries to Europe, reversing centuries of movement. And the Church is becoming increasingly global, multilingual, and multi-ethnic. Eventually, the logic of demographics may win out. But that doesn't mean it will be easy. The papacy is more than a spiritual office. It is tradition, power, symbolism, and change within it often moves at a glacial pace. Still, there is momentum, and history has a way of circling back to the places it began. Christianity's earliest foundations were African. Its future might be too. So when people ask, why has there never been an African pope? The answer is layered, uncomfortable, and incomplete. But maybe, just maybe, the next chapter will be written in a language older than Latin, on a soil richer than gold, by a man whose ancestors once taught the world how to pray. If you enjoyed this story, share this video. More people need to know the truth. And if you want to explore more forgotten history, hit subscribe. We have a lot more to uncover together.